Welcome. It's 11 o'clock. My name is Greg Chambers. This is the latest in the U.S. Farm Data Lead Generation webinar series. And today we're going to talk about a topic that's a little fuzzy, a little unclear. We got some emails back from people saying, what exactly is this about? It's about a PR distribution machine, which PR is press releases. I know sometimes it stands for public relations, and I'd say this is public relations light, because we're not going to be talking about like what to do in a crisis, but we are going to be talking about how to get the word out, which is something that happens inside of a public relations firm. So let me run through real quick today what we're going to be talking about. Well, first, the thing we're going to be covering is just the big idea, right? Which is we want to get, how is it that we can get more visibility in front of our target audience? So as part of that, we'll talk about the different types of press releases that how we've broken them down, the types of press releases that we see out there and that we use. We'll talk about how we can distribute them and how to target that distribution, how to measure the effectiveness of it, because we know that sometimes your CFO is going to be like, I'm sorry, you want to spend what on what, and how is it that you're going to justify that? We'll talk about how to get those measures. And then the last thing we'll talk about is how to get published. So there's a few ways to get mentions in articles, as well as to get articles into publications that we can cover with you. We'll talk about the process that we use internally, and you can use it yourself. So thanks for joining us today. If you're like us and you just are taking a break from the Christmas music, we can go ahead and get started. But before we begin, if there are any questions, the chat box is there, and Nui is there to help us. She will monitor the chat box, and if you have other questions, you can put them into the Q&A, part of the Zoom tool, and we can get to that at the proper time. But let's go ahead and start with what current media looks like. That's really the first place to start. Is let's kind of draw a fence around what it is that we're going to be talking about today. And what the current media looks like is we break it into, I forget where I got this, but somebody out there deserves credit for coming up with this little Venn diagram of earned, owned, and paid media. And so earned, up at the top there, that's really what we're after here. The goal of this webinar is how do we get the people that are in our target audience, how do we get them to talk about us? How do we start spreading the word? Owned is probably everything that we build. That's, if you just think about like our website, our mobile websites, social media, anytime that, like if we put a page out on LinkedIn or a page on Facebook, that's owned media, even though we're kind of owning that media on somebody else's platform. That's what the owned media universe looks like. And then paid, when we think about paid, we think about our big friends, right? Google, Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn, they have giant audiences that we want to get in front of, and they allow us the privilege of paying for access to get in front of those people. What we're going to be talking about today is we want to get into this sweet spot, which is the big win, right? Which is where you leverage all three of these areas to increase awareness in the target market. So if all that blue out there could be exactly who our target market is, that darkest color is the one where we're getting the most impressions and probably getting some mind share. When the trick to get all three of those working together, which is what we'll be covering, is sometimes we're really strong in one or two, right? So earned and paid, when I think of somebody who's in that earned and paid segment, I think of somebody who's like an Instagram star. They don't actually own the platform that they've built it on. They may be really buzzy, people are talking about them, and they may even be increasing their reach by paying for access, but they don't own the platform. And then what ends up happening is that if there's any changes, which in today's internet age, right, there have been changes. MySpace stars, maybe some of them were able to transition to a new platform, but my son at one point was Tumblr famous. He had, I don't know, 100,000 followers because I don't know what he did. He was just a little kid. And then Tumblr kind of got a little adultish. So we had to remove him from that. That's what I think of when I think of earned and paid. Owned and paid is where most of us are, which is we're just not very buzzy, right? We own media. We have our websites. We have some of our pages. We work at that. We pay for some access on other channels, but there's really not a lot of people out there talking about us. That's really what this webinar is going to be covering. And then for the people who happen to be in the lucky spot of owned and earned, which is people are already talking about them, this webinar is not exactly for you. You'd probably get more out of our webinars on the pay-per-click advertising that we do. But the challenge there is that you really don't have reach. It's only when you get all of those working together that you really get to take advantage of this, maximizing this rule of 30. And if you're not familiar with it, we talk about it on most of our webinars, which is we know that if you give us a message and we are trying to get it in front of your clients, it takes an average of 10 exposures to it where they actually see it, where they receive the message before your client can actually understand what it is that you're talking about. The rule of 30 comes from only 1/3 of those messages at best gets through. So we need to plan on how is it that we can get in front of them with any particular message 30 times. And that's really what this piece is about. And if we think about like, why are we even bothering to talk about this? It's because when it comes to press releases and getting them out into the public, many of us have used, including myself, these press release services. And they're kind of, it's hard to measure, right? It's a little bit mysterious. They're a little opaque, and they can be expensive. $200 per press release at the least. It looks like the prices, I just copied this last week, and those prices, it looks like they're going up. To get those things out, it's easy to spend a lot of money if you don't have to, and we're going to try to take out some of that frustration. So if that's clear as to what we're trying to, this owned, paid, earned media universe is what we're working in, let's talk about some of the press releases. So if we think about it as a press release as a note that we're sending into the earned places for media, right? So the places that'll talk about us, whether it's they'll talk about us on social media or if they talk about us in the press, there's 3 different kinds. One is announcement, which is, basically we have promotions, events, something about our company that we're putting out. We'll have a story pitch, which is we're trying to alert everybody about some lists or trends. Really, I think about that as like bait for the press. We're trying to get the press to say like, oh, I might not write about Open Table, but I will talk about the 100 best restaurants in America for 2018. Or it's an opinion piece. In this case, this was about George H.W. Bush and United's final reflecting on his serving on their board there. But it's an opinion, right? It's like, we think this about that. And then by breaking a single press release idea of this is what a press release is into these are 3 different kinds, let's kind of talk about each one. The standard announcement of what's going on inside of our business, this is great. We love using these for local business journals, the local newspaper. We'll try to get it into some national press, but at best, when we try to use those press release services and it's a standard announcement that we're putting out, the best we can really hope for is maybe it gets picked up by some deep Forbes page. So you've heard of, everybody knows who Forbes is. And if we can get the press release picked up in there, we can at least say, hey, maybe you've seen us in Forbes. I don't know how well that technique works, but at least it kind of gives the impression that we're getting some earned media out there. The feature of these is that really that they're all about you. And as being such, it really needs to be super interesting in order for it to get picked up for earned media. Compare that to something that's a little bit more of a story pitch. So this is, you're placing your company inside of something bigger, something like a trend. You're noting it, and you're saying the goal here is that we're trying to get earned media mentions, like the story 100 Best Restaurants, right? Or Americans are moving south. Open Table and Lending Tree are trying to be part of that conversation and trying to get freelancers and journalists to maybe write about that. So it's not totally focused on you, but it's you in the media, like you're just serving as an in-between, and hopefully they're going to contact you and make you a bigger feature of that story. The third one is an opinion piece, right? That's a thought leader's thoughts. And I don't know if you've heard of this term, newsjacking. David Meerman Scott has talked about, he's the one that gave it this term, but he talks about the life cycle of a story. So if we look at interest on the left and on the y-axis and time on the x-axis, as stories are starting to build, they kind of run through a life cycle of, they get super popular and everybody's interested, and then pretty soon it's old news and then it's done. And so you can insert yourself into that. And so some of these, like when United Spinal Association, since George Bush served on their board for many years, they could have put this out at any particular time. But what they were trying to do, right, is they want to be noticed during that time period when, right after his death, when everybody's there. So that's really the three different kinds. We use all three of these, the standard announcement, the story pitch, and the opinions, but we expect different results from them each time we use them, right? So let's talk about that. In order to get the right results from the right type of press release, we need to start with what it is that we're actually trying to accomplish, right? Set good goals for the year. The way we do that is we always start in the future and then work our way back. So let's say it's January of 2020. The question that I would ask if you're doing a press release effort, if you're trying to get more earned media, is what would a win look like? How can we quantify that or qualify it? And then how can we take a look at all sides of what a successful effort would look like? And then we work our way back to next month, right? This is how it would start next month, and knowing that this is what success looks like in the future. And the way we can, the reason we do that is because then we can put some tracking on it. So if I want to get back to, like I said at the beginning, your CFO is going to be asking questions as to how is it that we're going to know that this whole thing works? We can start to look for evidence. If we know what the goals are, if we know what we're trying to accomplish, we can say, what will the evidence be that will help us there? And when we think about evidence, we always think about it in three different parts, right? There's hard evidence where we know exactly, we can see it, feel it. There's anecdotal, so if hard evidence is see it, anecdotal is more feel it, right? It just feels like we're busier. And then third party evidence is there anything that's out there where they can push it towards us? We can track a lot of this stuff. We can track impressions, like we can even inside of impressions and analytics, we can maybe even define our target audience, and we can see how many impressions we get in front of them. We can build searches around our company name, and we can try to get those up. Google AdWords, I still think, is the best way to measure that. Yeah, you're paying for anybody who clicks on your name when they search for it, but at the same time, at least Google is giving you accurate reporting as to the number of times that people are searching for your company, your executives, et cetera. And then one of the biggest earned media is how many mentions are we getting in social media? How many articles are we part of? How many interviews are we part of inside those articles? Have we done any podcasts, things like that? We can put measures on those for evidence so that we know where it is we're going. So let me give you an example. This is a consultant that we were working with, and we say, she says, here's what I have to spend on this project, $2,100. What is it that I'm going to get from it? And what we could say is, do a good, bad, ugly. This is how you know it was successful. So if we were starting with her in 2019, we would say, if there's $2,100 you're investing in this, what is the very best case scenario? And she came up with, at the very least, right, her new clients come in at an average rate of $7,500. A new client pays for everything, gives her a little extra margin. That's good. That's good. She could live with, even if a new client didn't come in, if there were some articles out there, if she was mentioned in articles, and then she could take all that and leverage it to her email address, to her email list, to the people that she knows. And then she'll know it was terrible, and it was an investment that does not need to be repeated if there was no articles, no mentions. So with that in mind, we can start to build a machine that's going to help us get to that point. So if that makes any sense, that's our groundwork, right? That's what PR is to us and the mechanics of how we would build a campaign. Let's get into the juice right here, which is how is it that you can build your own distribution network and not have to rely on some of those other distribution networks? The way that starts is we always start out with who is it we're trying to reach, right? Who are the people that are out there? And if we're going to get our ideas out using paid media and owned media, which are the things that we can control so that we can get over to the earned media, who is it that we're trying to reach? And we try to break those into groups. And those groups are, right, if this is where we can find all of these things, the groups that we're looking for are people that we know, right? People that know us already, they tend to be our customers, people that we want to target, people that look like our customers, and then press, right? The people who are talking to the people that we want to target. That would be a way to break into, to break who it is that we're trying to reach into 3 different targets. So let's talk about this with like our people. So if our people, right, the email address, so I use MailChimp. If you have your newsletters happening inside of MailChimp, that's your owned media, right? And then what you can do is the first thing is, are you matching it inside of paid media? So if you're communicating with your list at all, are you also trying to reach them on other channels? Because they tend to be, right, social media, they tend to be connected to other people. So if they like or read or react to anything that you're putting out there, then that happens to spread out to their network. They happen to look probably a lot like us. So is it matched in LinkedIn? That's paid. Facebook, Google. It's who we know, right? If we go back to those 3 targets that we're looking at, those are people that know us. They know what we're doing. They should be the easiest ones to help us spread the word with our into earned media. But that's not going to be enough, right? We also have these people that we want to know. And so with that, this is really where we get into, if you attended our profiling webinar, we have a whole scoring tool that we use, that we put together in there, that I would suggest digging into. But really, we dig through all of our current contacts, our old contacts. We hunt for third-party lists. We're trying to build a big distribution list around the people that we want to get in front of. And I would say this about this stage of getting in front of the people that you know. This is where you have permission to be a little bit of a data hoarder. You need to get permission to stay in touch with these people, but then once you do, it's okay to stay in touch. And so if they're somewhere in your list, don't discard them because they're not doing business with you currently. Try to stay in front of them, because as we build these earned media lists, we're trying to go back to that rule of 30. How do we get more impressions in front of them until they finally get it? We just had this happen to us this week. A guy called us. I mean, these conversations, some of these conversations happened 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago. And he finally was searching for something. He was searching for aerial advertising and bumped into some of the local search engine optimization work that those aerial banner people were doing. And he called us and he's like, is this what you're talking about? I don't know how many times we talked about it. We actually, I think, gave him proposals on it and he still didn't get it. It takes a while for our customers to kind of catch up to where we are. So be a hoarder, stay in touch with these people. And then the press. So this becomes the mystery piece, right? How is it that we get in front of the press? Where do we get in front of the press? I usually just start with articles. So if we find articles, so here was an article about a food producer, Epic Provisions. The person who wrote the article becomes of interest, right? I can usually, if that's in Inc. magazine, I can click on his name and it will pull up Tom Foster, and I can see Tom Foster has written some articles for Inc. But also I can tell by going to his Twitter page, I can creep on him a little bit, right? He is a freelancer. And the thing is with freelancers, so we may be pitching the media, but freelancers, that's what they do too. And they tend to be a little better at it than we do because that's where they make their money. So creep on them. And then I would say, make a pitch to them. So if you can start doing this, you can start building your own press list, right? Your press list may start with 1 or 2 people, but over the course of a year, we should be able to build that up, right? So by the time the end of 2020 comes around, there should be some people that we've pitched along the way and gotten permission to stay in touch with. Our PR list may be 7, and 7 is better than nothing. In this article that I've kind of quoted right there, this Neiman Lab, and we'll send you these slides so you can get the link on that, so don't worry about having to copy it down right now. But this how to successfully pitch the New York Times or anyone else is really, that's great advice, right? Be concise. That seems to be, the brevity seems to be what most of these freelancers and press release or press people are after. We need to quickly tell them why it's important and who it's important to, which tends to be their audience, right? So in this case, Inc., small businesses, we need to show them that this is why this would be important to their audience. And then we need to demonstrate that we can actually do the work, right? Ask for some of the work ourselves. So press mentions. So if this is getting in front of, finding a way to get in front of the people in the press, one way to get press mentions that we've used successfully is there's a couple services out there. One is free. It's called Haro, Help a Reporter Out. You can go subscribe to it and you'll get 3 emails a day. Those 3 emails contain tons of stories. So yes, it's free. And yes, there's a lot of freelancers looking for contributions to their articles, but it's a lot of work because a lot of these outlets, I got published early on responding to these things. You get published on bizarre blogs, things that are just they're just trying to pump out content. And I don't know if that really helps. But what I did find that did help was PR leads. It was $100 a month, but the publication, and the reason it worked better is because the publications were better. All it takes when you get these is you subscribe to and look for your segment. So in this case, we're looking for ag-related news. And then you'll get I'm looking for something, and it just takes a quick bullet point. So this is, if you're interested in this, I have a template that I use where the top part is always the same because it's just, this is who I'm responding to this. I put what the link is, and then I give them a quick bullet point. Here's one idea or 2 ideas that I have on this. I try to be brief and interesting, and then add the reporter to the list, right? Because whoever it gets to, oftentimes they're blanked out addresses, but then when the people respond, thanks for responding, I can't help you with this. If you can grab that address at that time and then reply, no problem, I have lots of story ideas. That goes into your general list. So it's just who you are, 1 or 2 bullet points that are interesting to them, your contact info, and then at the bottom there, those are just examples of press mentions that we've had or articles that have been written. Writing your own articles, speaking of that same thing, writing your own articles follows really the same process. So it's similar to pitching articles, right? You want to be concise, informative, but you're kind of taking on the role of the freelancer and you're telling the publication, hey, publication, I have a story idea for you, and this is what it is, right? It's previously unpublished. This is what your readers are going to get. This is why it would be important to them. This is how long it would take me to produce it. And this is evidence that I've done this before. So at the beginning, when we first do this, right, we don't really have much evidence, but that's okay. All it takes is 1. And so those early mentions I got on those bizarre news outlets, those became the first mentions. And then over time, you start to build up a little bit better universe of press release mentions. And what you find is that it is easier because you get better at it. But what I've really found is that I don't pitch as many of these anymore because once you kind of get on their list and you've contributed an article or 2, they tend to reach out to you and say, can you comment on this? Especially if they didn't have to pay you for it, which is often the case, right? So now I've got a bunch of free labor pumping out articles. So that's the how to build your own press release world, right? It's starting with the end in mind. We want to, if we know what success looks like, it's a lot easier for us to get there. Segmenting the audiences and segmenting the types of approaches that we take to each of these markets, that is way better than a one size fits all, and you'll see better results over time. Have a point of view. One of the things that we see most of all is people are afraid to put out there that the language on a lot of press releases is squishy. It doesn't need to be squishy. It can be, you can be pretty declarative or declarative, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to get out into the earned media space. Focus on the customer, because that's really what everybody else is focused on too. So it really isn't about you getting into the press. It's about, hey, hey, freelancer, I can help you get an article published in this publication, or hey, publication, I can help your readers, which will help you attract more advertising. That's what they're after. Try not to be a secret. It's hard, but nobody, right? No matter how good of a horn player you are, if you're not tooting it, nobody's going to hear it. And the last thing is it's a process, right? 1% improvement over time adds up. So I ran through a lot in that 25 minutes. If you have any questions, now would be the time to throw them into the box. And while that happens, I'm just going to roll through some of these resources that we have for you. If you haven't read it yet, The Human Being's Guide to Business Growth, we're happy to send you a copy of this. It's a great way to get some ideas about how to unleash some hidden growth inside your company, the best way I know how. And the perfect growth formula is a framework that Bill Matern and I have used to facilitate discussions, better discussions between sales and marketing. And then we have a tool. If you need help with any of this, if you want to build a PR machine, your own press release machine, or you want some help with press releases, or you want to get better at pitching articles, we have templates, we have advice, we have resources. We even have people who will do it for you. Give us a try over at leadgencompass.com. We're happy to help you there. And then to get in touch with us, usfarmdata.com, leadgencompass.com. Call us. You can call us at any time. And email us info@usfarmdata.com. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. So hopefully it's been helpful to you. Remember, we're all after this earned media. You can leverage your owned media and your paid media to increase your chances of getting more free press out there. And we'd love to help you do it. Have a good holiday. We'll probably not talk to you until, I don't think we have another webinar, do we, Nui? Until next year. So 2019, we'll talk to you later. Bye.